You're just the babysitter, Eleanor. You don't get to make decisions about my children's education." Those words from Victoria's lips shattered something inside me. After 40 years of building a successful business with my late husband, after creating a multi-million-dollar trust fund for my grandchildren, after dropping everything to help raise Emma and Liam when Matt and Victoria's careers demanded more time, this is what I had become in their eyes. Just the babysitter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood frozen in their marble-floored kitchen, the words hanging between us like poison. My hand still held the brochure for the music program I thought Emma would love. Victoria hadn't even looked at it before dismissing me. She simply continued typing on her laptop, barely glancing up as she crushed my place in my grandchildren's lives with a few casual words. What Victoria didn't know, what neither she nor my son realized, was that the previous day I had finalized the paperwork making me the sole trustee of my grandchildren's $4.7 million trust fund. My financial advisor, Sophia, had advised against giving Matt and Victoria direct access, suggesting we wait until the children were older. I had been on the fence, ready to add their names. Until that moment. Until just the babysitter. Walking. Out of their custom-built home that day, I made a decision. The trust fund that would have secured their children's future, the fortune I had carefully grown over decades, it would remain under my control. And I would make sure that Victoria Patterson learned exactly how much power just a babysitter could wield. I never planned to be wealthy. Howard and I started our investment firm in our garage with nothing but student loans and determination. Those early years were lean, counting pennies at the grocery store, fixing our ancient Toyota with YouTube tutorials, living in a one-bedroom apartment until Matt was 7. But those struggles made us stronger, taught us to value every dollar, every opportunity. By the time Howard passed away 5 years ago, Patterson Family Investments managed over $300 million in assets. I had spent 40 years building that legacy, watching pennies grow into dollars, dollars into millions. My colleagues often suggested I retire, enjoy the fruits of my labor. But the truth was, the business had become my identity, especially after Howard's heart attack left me suddenly alone. Matt, our only child, had never shown interest in the family business. He preferred corporate law, secure in the knowledge that his inheritance would always be there as a safety net. He married Victoria right after law school, beautiful, ambitious Victoria, with her marketing degree and family connections. I tried to love her like a daughter from the beginning. I overlooked the subtle digs about our modest beginnings, her reluctance to visit unless it involved discussing their financial future. When Emma was born 8 years ago, something shifted in me. Holding that tiny bundle, I felt a love I hadn't experienced since Matt was born. The day they brought her home from the hospital, I showed up with homemade meals and offered to stay and help. "We've hired a night nurse," Victoria told me coolly. "We don't need you to exhaust yourself." But I persisted, finding ways to be present in my granddaughter's life. Then Liam arrived 3 years later, and Victoria's high-powered marketing career took off simultaneously. Suddenly, my presence wasn't just tolerated, it was needed. I adjusted my work schedule, cutting back to 3 days a week so I could take the children to school, prepare their meals, help with homework, and attend their activities. "We're so lucky to have you, Mom," Matt would say, kissing my cheek as he rushed out the door at 6 a.m., briefcase in hand. But the truth was, I felt lucky to have them. Being with Emma and Liam filled the Howard-shaped hole in my life. I loved watching Emma's face light up when she mastered a piano piece, or seeing Liam's concentration as he built elaborate structures with his blocks. I treasured our after-school walks through Sycamore Gardens, collecting leaves and making up stories about the people we passed. I never asked for payment. The idea seemed absurd. These were my grandchildren, not a job. Besides, I had more money than I could spend in 2 lifetimes. Last year, when Howard's business partner Walter passed away unexpectedly, I received another windfall. Walter had no children, and he'd always treated me like family. He left me his shares in our company, along with his extensive property holdings. Overnight, my net worth nearly doubled. "You need to make some decisions about estate planning," Richard Grayson, our family attorney, told me during a meeting. Shortly after, "With assets of this magnitude, you should consider establishing trusts for Emma and Liam." The idea resonated with me immediately. I remembered how Howard and I had struggled to pay for Matt's college, taking out second mortgages, and working overtime. I wanted Emma and Liam to have opportunities without burden. The best schools, travel experiences, starter homes when they graduated, seed money if they wanted to start businesses. I worked with Richard and Sophia for months, establishing a trust that would support my grandchildren through every stage of life while encouraging responsibility. The structure was thoughtful. Funds for education available immediately, larger distributions at ages 25, 30, and 35, with provisions for healthcare, housing, and entrepreneurship. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "What about Matt and Victoria?" Richard asked during one meeting. "Will they be co-trustees?" I hesitated. Let me think about it. The truth was, I had concerns. Victoria's spending habits worried me. The luxury cars traded in every 2 years, the designer wardrobes, the spontaneous first-class vacations. Matt wasn't much better, always chasing the trappings of wealth rather than building something lasting. I feared the temptation of millions sitting in an account they controlled might prove too strong. Still, they were the children's parents. I had nearly convinced myself to add their names when everything changed. It began with Emma's interest in music. During our afternoons together, I noticed how she lingered at my piano, picking out melodies and beaming with pride when she played. Something recognizable. One day, I found a renowned music program at Wellington Academy that seemed perfect for her talents. "I think Emma has real potential," I told Victoria that fateful afternoon, extending the brochure. "This program could—" "You're just the babysitter." "Eleanor," Victoria cut in, her eyes never leaving her laptop screen. "You don't get to make decisions about my children's education." Just the babysitter. 5 decades of life experience, a successful business career, and the deep love only a grandmother could offer, reduced to just the babysitter. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply placed the brochure on the counter, kissed my grandchildren goodbye, and walked out the door. The next morning, I called Richard. "I've made my decision," I told him. "I'll be the sole trustee of the Children's Trust. Neither Matt nor Victoria will have access to the funds." "Are you certain?" Richard asked, concern evident in his voice. "This might create tension in the family." "I'm certain," I replied, my voice steady. "The money is for Emma and Liam's future, not for their parents' lifestyle." I didn't tell Matt or Victoria about the trust fund. I had planned to surprise them with the news at Christmas, presenting it as a gift for the children's future. Now, I decided to keep it private. The trust existed, the money was secure, but only I would control its distribution. Life continued as usual for several weeks. I still cared for the children 3 days a week, still prepared their favorite meals, still helped with homework. But something had changed inside me. I observed Victoria more carefully, noticing how she barely looked up from her phone when Emma showed her an art project, how she delegated Liam's bedtime stories to me while she attended essential dinner meetings. Then came the charity gala at Willowbrook Country Club. As a major donor to the Children's Hospital, I was expected to attend. Matt and Victoria usually joined me. Networking opportunities were never wasted in their world. That night, we shared a table with Victoria's parents, Harold and Heather Blackwell. "Eleanor, you look tired," Heather commented as we waited for the main course. These children must be running you ragged. I enjoy every minute with them, I replied honestly. Well, it's wonderful that Matt and Victoria have such reliable help, Harold added, swirling his bourbon. Childcare is so expensive these days. Mother isn't childcare, Matt interjected, looking uncomfortable. She's family. Of course she is, Victoria said smoothly, patting my hand with condescension that made my skin crawl. But let's be honest, we'd be paying a fortune for the hours Mom puts in. We're just lucky she doesn't have much else to occupy her time. Doesn't have much else to occupy her time. The words stung like a slap, as if my life before becoming their convenient childcare solution had been empty and meaningless. Actually, I said quietly, I've been thinking about getting more involved at the foundation again. Walter's projects need someone to oversee them. Victoria's smile tightened. But you're so good with the children. They'd be devastated if you weren't there. Would they be devastated? I asked carefully. Or would your schedule be devastated? A flash of irritation crossed Victoria's perfect features. We can discuss this later, Eleanor. This isn't the place. No, I agreed, placing my napkin beside my plate and rising. It isn't. I left the gala early, driving myself home to the house on Oakwood Avenue, where Howard and I had raised Matt, where we'd built our life together. It was too big for me now, echoing with memories, but I'd never been able to bring myself to sell it. That night, I sat in Howard's study, surrounded by the books he loved, and allowed myself to really think about my life. After Howard's death, I had poured myself into being the perfect grandmother, filling the emptiness with Emma and Liam's needs. But in the process, I had allowed Matt and Victoria to take advantage of my grief, my loneliness, my desire to be needed. The next morning, I called Grace Mitchell, my oldest friend. We met at Brood Awakening, the little coffee shop where we'd spent countless hours over the decades. They're using you, Ellie, Grace said bluntly after I recounted the previous night's events. They have been for years. They need help with the children, I protested weakly. They need free, high-quality childcare from someone who won't complain or set boundaries, Grace corrected me. And you're letting them do it because you're afraid of losing access to your grandchildren. Her words struck a nerve. What should I do? Start living your life again, she said firmly. You've spent 5 years in suspended animation since Howard died. The business is suffering without your full attention. The foundation work has stalled. You've turned down 3 river cruises with me because Victoria needs help with the children. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I had shrunk myself to fit into the narrow role they had assigned me: convenient grandmother, unpaid nanny, silent benefactor. I'm going back to work full-time, I decided aloud. The company needs me, especially with Walter gone now. And what about the children? Grace asked. Matt and Victoria make plenty of money. They can hire childcare like every other working parent. The decision felt liberating, as if I'd put down a heavy burden I hadn't realized. I was carrying. The next day, I called Victoria to share my plans. That's not possible, she said immediately. We have our schedules set through the end of the year. You can't just abandon the children. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied calmly. I'm giving you 3 weeks' notice, which is more than generous. I'm sure you can find excellent childcare in that time. This is so irresponsible, Eleanor, Victoria snapped. We depend on you. Yes, I said quietly. You do. That weekend, Matt came to see me alone, a rare occurrence. He found me in the garden, tending to the roses Howard had planted. Mom, what's going on? He asked, his expression troubled. Victoria says you're refusing to help with the kids anymore. I'm not refusing to help, I corrected him. I'm returning to my role as CEO of the company your father and I built. I've neglected it too long. But what about Emma and Liam? They need you. They need quality care, which you and Victoria can easily afford to provide. Matt ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. Is this about money? Do you want us to pay you? The question stunned me. No, Matthew. This is about respect. This is about acknowledging that I have value beyond free childcare. Of course you have value, Mom. We've always appreciated everything you do. Have you? I asked softly. When was the last time either of you asked? About the business? Or my foundation work? When was the last time you considered that I might have dreams and plans that don't revolve around your convenience? He looked genuinely confused. I thought you wanted to spend time with the kids. You seemed happy. I love Emma and Liam with all my heart, I assured him. But somewhere along the way, loving them became synonymous with serving your household. That stops now. Matt left troubled, but I stood firm. Over the next few weeks, Victoria cycled through emotions, anger, manipulation, guilt-tripping, and, finally, cold acceptance. They hired a nanny, a pleasant young woman named Olivia who came with excellent references. I made the transition as smooth as possible for the children's sake, explaining that Grandma had important work to do, but would still see them often for special outings and family dinners. I returned to Patterson Family Investments full-time, throwing myself into the work Howard and I had loved. The company had drifted somewhat in the years of my reduced involvement, but with renewed focus, I began steering it back to profitability. I also took over Walter's position at the foundation, reviewing grant applications and planning fundraising events. For the first time since Howard's death, I felt like myself again, not just someone's mother or grandmother, but Eleanor Patterson, businesswoman and philanthropist in my own right. The first real test came 6 weeks later when Victoria called on a Tuesday afternoon. Emma has a fever, and Olivia has a family emergency. You need to come over. Not, could you please help us, or we're in a difficult situation. Just, you need to come over. I'm sorry, but I'm in a meeting with international clients right now, I explained. I can't leave. This is your granddaughter we're talking about, Victoria said incredulously. Yes, and she has 2 capable parents. One of you will need to leave work early. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice tight with anger. I have a presentation I can't miss. Then Matt will have to help. That's how parenting works, Victoria. I ended the call and returned to my meeting, but my hands were shaking. Standing up to them was harder than I had anticipated. Part of me wanted to drop everything and rush to Emma's side. But I knew this boundary was necessary, not just for me, but ultimately for all of us. Later that evening, I called to check. On Emma. Matt answered, sounding exhausted. She's fine. Her fever broke an hour ago. I'm glad. Did you manage your work situation? He sighed heavily. I had to reschedule a client meeting. Victoria's furious. Welcome to parenthood, I said, not unkindly. Your father and I rescheduled hundreds of meetings over the years when you were sick. It's different now, Mom. The professional world is more competitive. It was competitive then, too, I reminded him. We just prioritized differently. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I felt a small victory. For the first time, Matt and Victoria had been forced to make the kind of sacrifice parents have always made, putting their child's needs above their professional convenience. Over the following months, a new pattern emerged. I saw the children on weekends, taking them to museums, parks, and special events. I attended their school performances and sports games, but I was no longer at their beck and call, no longer the default solution to every childcare crisis. Victoria's whine. Resentment was palpable. Gone was the pretense of treating me like family. At gatherings, her responses to me were clipped and cold. She scheduled family events without consulting my availability, then expressed exaggerated disappointment when I couldn't attend. "The children were so looking forward to seeing you," she would say within their hearing, manufacturing guilt with practiced precision. But I had broken free from that particular trap. "I'm disappointed too. Next time, let's check calendars before setting a date." The real breaking point came during Emma's 8th birthday party at their home. Victoria had arranged an elaborate celebration with a fairy tale theme, complete with a castle cake and a princess performer. I arrived with carefully chosen gifts, books, about strong female scientists and artists, along with a telescope Emma had been coveting. After the children had moved to the backyard for games, I overheard Victoria speaking to her mother in the kitchen. "It's actually better this way," she was saying. Eleanor was getting too involved, confusing the children about who was really raising them. Now they understand she's just an occasional visitor in their lives. "Still," Heather replied, "the free childcare was certainly convenient. Have you considered having a frank conversation about financial support instead? With her resources, she could easily pay for full-time help." "We've discussed it," Victoria admitted. "Matt thinks we should approach her about setting up trust, funds for the children's education. With what she's worth now after Walter's death, she could easily set aside a few million without feeling it." I stood frozen in the hallway, the punch cup in my hand suddenly heavy. They were discussing my money, the money Howard and I had worked decades to build, the money I had already committed to Emma and Liam's future, as if it were community property, as if they had any right to direct its allocation. What hurt most wasn't the presumption about my wealth. It was the casual dismissal of my role in my grandchildren's lives. Just an occasional visitor. After all the hours, all the love, all the silent support I had provided, I had been reduced to an ATM with a grandmother's face. I placed the cup on a side table and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. In my car, I pulled out my phone and called Richard Grayson. "I need to make changes to the trust," I said without preamble. "Significant ones." Richard was silent for a moment after I explained what I'd overheard. "Eleanor, are you certain you want to do this? Changing the trust structure now could have long-lasting implications for your relationship with Matthew." My relationship with my son changed the moment he and Victoria decided I was nothing more than convenient childcare and a potential source of funding, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "The trust was created out of love, not obligation. If they see me only as a financial resource, then I need to reevaluate how that resource is managed." "What specifically do you want to change?" Richard asked, his tone carefully professional. "I want full discretionary control," I said firmly. "No automatic distributions at specific ages. Every disbursement will require my approval, or after my death, approval from an independent trustee committee, not Matthew or Victoria." "That's a significant modification," Richard cautioned. "The children won't receive funds automatically even when they're adults. They'll receive what they need when they need it, for education, healthcare, reasonable living expenses. But I want to ensure the money supports their growth, not their parents' expectations or lifestyle." By the time I hung up, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my dashboard. I hadn't even realized I'd been sitting in my car for almost an hour. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Matt. I turned it off and drove home. The following Monday, I met with Richard and Sophia to formalize the changes. We restructured the trust completely, adding provisions I hadn't initially considered necessary. Funds could only be used for education at accredited institutions. Medical expenses required documentation. Housing assistance came with strict parameters. Most importantly, I added a clause that required both children to complete financial literacy courses before receiving any significant distribution. "This is unusually restrictive," Sophia observed as she reviewed the documents. "It's protective," I corrected her. "I've watched how Matthew and Victoria handle money. They spend first and think later. I won't let Emma and Liam inherit that approach. As I signed the final papers, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The money was secure. Whatever happened between me and my son's family, the children would be provided for, on my terms. Matt showed up at my office later that week, unannounced. My assistant Benjamin looked apologetic as he ushered my son in. He insisted, Ms. Patterson. "It's fine, Ben. Thank you." Matt closed the door behind him, his expression a mixture of confusion and indignation. "You left Emma's birthday party without saying goodbye." She was upset. The guilt tactic again. I refused to take the bait. "I heard something that disturbed me. I needed some time to process it." "What could possibly—" "I overheard Victoria and Heather discussing how I should be financing your childcare now that I'm no longer providing it for free." He had the grace to look embarrassed, but recovered quickly. "Mom, that's not— Victoria sometimes speaks without thinking. You know, how her family is about money." "Yes, I do know. They believe everyone else's money should be at their disposal." "That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time either of you asked about my well-being rather than what I could do for you? When was the last time you considered that I might have needs of my own?" Matt ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that reminded me so much of Howard. "Look, we've been under a lot of pressure. Victoria's up for partner at her firm. I've got the Westland merger. The kids have their activities. We're just trying to keep everything afloat." "And you assumed I would always be there to fill the gaps. You're their grandmother. We thought you wanted to be involved." "There's a difference between being involved and being exploited, Matthew." The words hung between us, sharp and undeniable. My son looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his mother or the children's grandmother, but as a woman who had finally drawn a line. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. "Respect," I said simply. "Acknowledgement that my time and resources are mine to allocate, not yours to expect. Recognition that I have value beyond what I can provide to your family." Matt nodded slowly, though I could see he didn't fully understand. He was raised in comfort that Howard and I had worked hard to provide. Despite our best efforts, he had never truly grasped the value of what he'd been given. "I'll talk to Victoria," he promised. "We can figure out a better arrangement." "I hope so," I replied, not entirely convinced. "Because I've already made some changes of my own." "What kind of changes?" "Personal ones," I said vaguely. "I'm reclaiming my life, Matthew. It's long overdue." He left unsatisfied, but I felt no obligation to elaborate. The trust modifications were complete, the papers filed. What mattered now was establishing a new normal, one where I was respected, not just needed. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in work. Patterson family investments had drifted somewhat during my years of reduced involvement. Several key accounts needed attention, and Walter's projects at the foundation required restructuring. I hired new talent, reorganized departments, and scheduled meetings with our most important clients. For the first time in years, I felt fully engaged, my mind sharp and focused on building something beyond myself. Victoria made a perfunctory attempt at reconciliation, inviting me to Sunday dinner. The atmosphere was strained. She smiled too brightly, asked overly polite questions about my work, and made a show of consulting me about Emma's summer camp options, all while subtly reminding me how much the children missed their time with me. "Emma keeps asking when you'll pick her up from school again," she mentioned casually over dessert. "She loved those special afternoons with you." "I miss our time together, too," I said honestly. "Perhaps we could arrange regular outings on weekends? The art museum has a wonderful new exhibit she'd enjoy." "Weekends are so busy with activities," Victoria sighed. "Weekdays really worked better for everyone." And there it was, the truth, beneath the pleasantries. Weekdays worked better because it solved their childcare needs. My relationship with my grandchildren was valuable primarily when it served their schedule. "I'm afraid weekdays don't work for me anymore," I replied pleasantly. My calendar is fully booked for the foreseeable future. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Well, the children will be disappointed, but I suppose your work has to come first now. The slight pause before work spoke volumes. In Victoria's world, my business, the one that had funded their comfortable lifestyle, was somehow less legitimate, less important than her own career. Yes, I agreed calmly, just as your work comes first for you. The children seemed confused by the new arrangement. Emma especially had grown accustomed to our regular time together. I made a special effort to call them several times a week, sending small gifts and notes to remind them of my love. It wasn't the same as our daily connection, but I was determined to maintain our bond despite the circumstances. One Tuesday afternoon, my assistant Ben interrupted a meeting. "Ms. Patterson, your son is online too. He says it's urgent." I excused myself and took the call in my office. "Matthew, what's wrong?" "There's been an accident at school. Liam fell from the playground equipment and broke his arm. They're taking him to Pinecrest Medical now." My heart stuttered. "I'll meet you there." I canceled my remaining appointments and drove straight to the hospital, my mind racing with worry. By the time I arrived, Liam was already in treatment. I found Matt pacing in the waiting room, looking disheveled and anxious. "The school couldn't reach Victoria," he explained. "She's in meetings all day. They called me second, but I was in court when it happened. By the time I got the message and called back, they had already taken him in the ambulance." "Is he all right?" I asked, my concern solely for my grandson. "The nurse said it's a clean break. They're setting it now." He ran his hands through his hair, that familiar gesture. "They had to sedate him. He was so scared, Mom." My heart ached at the thought of Liam frightened and in pain. "Where's Emma?" "Still at school. Olivia is picking her up soon." Matt checked his watch anxiously. "I have to get back to court in 40 minutes. The judge already gave me a 1-hour recess, but this case has been on the docket for months. I can't." "Go," I said firmly. "I'll stay with Liam." The relief on his face was palpable. "Thank you. I'll come back as soon as I can. Victoria should be here by then, too." But Victoria didn't arrive for another 4 hours. By then, Liam's arm was set in a bright blue cast, and he was drowsy but stable in a hospital bed. I had read him stories, helped him choose a popsicle from the nurse's station, and soothed him through a bout of nausea from the pain medication. When Victoria finally swept in, designer handbag swinging from her arm, she barely acknowledged me. "Oh, my poor baby," she cooed, bending to kiss Liam's forehead. "Mommy's here now. Everything's going to be fine." Liam smiled sleepily at her, then turned to me. "Grandma stayed the whole time. She didn't leave me." Victoria's expression flickered. "That was kind of Grandma. But Mommy's here now, so Grandma can go." The dismissal was unmistakable. I gathered my purse and jacket, leaned down to kiss Liam's cheek, and promised to call him the next day. As I turned to leave, Victoria followed me into the hallway. "Thank you for covering until I could get here," she said, her tone making it clear this was a mere formality. "The discharge papers are being processed now. We can handle everything from here." "He was very brave," I told her. "The doctor said the break was clean, but he'll need follow-up appointments in 2 weeks." "Yes, I'm aware. I spoke with the doctor already." I nodded and turned to leave, but something made me pause. "Victoria, I know we've had our differences, but Liam and Emma mean everything to me. I will always be there when they need me." She adjusted her designer watch, barely meeting my eyes. "Of course. Family should help family when it's convenient." The barb was deliberate, throwing my workplace commitments back at me. I chose not to engage. "Give Liam my love when he wakes up. Tell him Grandma will call tomorrow." I walked away, with my head high, refusing to let her see how deeply her coldness affected me. In the parking garage, I finally allowed myself a moment of weakness, resting my forehead against the steering wheel as tears threatened. This was the cost of reclaiming my dignity, a growing distance from the grandchildren I adored. Was it worth it? The question haunted me as I drove home through the evening traffic. The next morning, I sent flowers to Liam's room and called to check on him. Matt answered, sounding exhausted. He's doing better. They're discharging him this afternoon. I'd be happy to help with his care, I offered. I could rearrange some meetings. Victoria's taken the rest of the week off, Matt interrupted, and her mother is coming to stay with us for a few days. Heather Blackwell would be helping instead of me. The message couldn't have been clearer. They were closing ranks, shutting me out. I see, I said carefully. Please let Liam know I called. I'll send over some books and puzzles that might entertain him while he's recovering. Thanks, Mom. Matt hesitated. Look, about yesterday. I appreciate you stepping in. I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't been available. I'll always be there for emergencies, Matthew. Always. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring out at the city skyline. The distance between me and my son's family was widening by the day. It wasn't what I wanted, but I couldn't see another path forward. Returning to the role of convenient grandmother, unpaid nanny, would mean surrendering my self-respect, yet standing my ground meant limited access to the children I loved. The weeks that followed settled into an uneasy pattern. Victoria orchestrated family gatherings with military precision, scheduling them at times that often conflicted with my work commitments, then expressing exaggerated disappointment when I couldn't attend. Matt made occasional attempts at bridging the gap, but they were half-hearted at best, easily overridden by his wife's influence. My time with Emma and Liam became increasingly structured and supervised. Gone were the spontaneous outings, the special moments, the private jokes. Victoria or Olivia was always present, hovering, monitoring, cutting visits short for various reasons. Then came the phone call that changed everything once again. Eleanor, Richard Grayson's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. We may have a situation. Matthew has been making inquiries about trust funds in your name. My blood ran cold. What kind of inquiries? He contacted a colleague at another firm, asking about the legal recourse for children whose grandparent establishes a trust, but then mentally declines and makes irrational changes to the arrangement. Mentally declines? I repeated, stunned. Is he suggesting I'm incompetent? He hasn't filed anything officially, Richard assured me, but the questions he's asking suggest he might be considering a challenge to your capacity as trustee. I thought you should know. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Matthew, my son, my only child, was actively exploring ways to wrest control of the trust fund from me under the guise of cognitive decline. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. That evening, I called my sister Judith. Unlike me, Judy had always seen Matthew and Victoria clearly, without the rose-colored glasses of maternal love. They're desperate, she said after I explained the situation. They've realized you won't be manipulated back into providing free childcare, and now they're afraid the money is slipping away too. He's my son, I said, my voice breaking. How could he even consider declaring me incompetent? Because Victoria is pushing him, Judy replied bluntly. And because he's never had to work for anything the way you and Howard did, he assumes wealth is his birthright. What should I do? Protect yourself, she advised firmly. Get full neurological and psychological evaluations documenting your cognitive health. Update your will and other documents. And most importantly, stop hoping they'll suddenly appreciate you. They've shown you who they are. Believe them. The next morning, I called Dr. Alan Brooks, our family physician for over 20 years. I explained the situation without emotion, requesting the most comprehensive cognitive assessment available. "This is ridiculous, Eleanor," he said, clearly offended on my behalf. "I've known you for decades. You're sharper than most of my patients, half your age. Nevertheless, I need documentation," I insisted. "Thorough, unimpeachable proof of my mental capacity." Over the next 2 weeks, I underwent extensive testing, neurological exams, cognitive assessments, psychological evaluations, all confirming what I already knew. I was perfectly competent, functioning at an exceptionally high level for my age or any age. Dr. Brooks compiled the results in a detailed report. "This should put any questions to rest," he assured me. "If Matthew pursues this, he'll be laughed out of court." I thanked him, then asked the question that had been weighing on me. "Alan, you've known Matthew since he was a child. Did I fail him somehow? Did I raise him to be this?" The doctor's expression softened with compassion. "You and Howard were exemplary parents, Eleanor. You gave him values, opportunities, boundaries. But ultimately, we all make our own choices. Matthew is making his now, influenced by greed and a wife whose value system is different from yours." His diplomatic phrasing almost made me smile. Different was certainly one way to describe Victoria's approach to life. Armed with medical documentation, I met with Richard again to review all my legal documents. We updated my will, healthcare directives, and power of attorney. I removed Matthew as my healthcare proxy, designating Judith instead. It felt like severing a limb, but I could no longer trust my son to act in my best interests. "There's something else I'd like to do," I told Richard as we wrapped up. "I want to establish a new foundation in Howard's name. Something focused on financial literacy for young people." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Any specific reason?" "I've been thinking about what went wrong with Matthew," I explained. "Howard and I gave him everything, but perhaps we sheltered him too much from the realities of building wealth. He never understood the value of money because he never had to work for it." We spent the next hour outlining the Howard Patterson Foundation for Financial Education. The irony wasn't lost on me. Creating a foundation to teach other children the lessons my own son had failed to learn. That evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Ben appeared at my door. "Ms. Patterson, your daughter-in-law is here. She's quite insistent about seeing you." Victoria rarely visited my office. Whatever had brought her here must be significant. "Send her in, Ben." Victoria swept in wearing an impeccably tailored suit, her expression a careful mask of concern. "Eleanor, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," I replied pleasantly. "What brings you here?" She settled into a chair, arranging herself carefully. "We're worried about you. Working such long hours at your age can't be healthy. Matthew and I think it might be time for you to consider stepping back, enjoying your retirement." The audacity was breathtaking. First, Matthew explored having me declared incompetent, and now Victoria was here suggesting I retire. Conveniently, freeing me to resume childcare duties while relinquishing control of my assets. "How thoughtful," I said, my tone neutral. "But I'm quite healthy and enjoying my work." "Matthew mentioned you've seemed confused lately, forgetful. It happens to everyone eventually." So this was their strategy. Plant seeds of doubt about my cognitive function, suggest I was declining, then swoop in to protect me and my assets. Really? I don't recall any incidents of confusion or forgetfulness. Perhaps Matthew could refresh my memory with specific examples. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "It's not about specific incidents. It's an overall pattern that concerns us. The way you abruptly withdrew from the children's lives, these sudden changes to your work schedule, your emotional outbursts." "Emotional outbursts? You mean my objection to being called just the babysitter? Or perhaps my disappointment at learning my son and his wife see me primarily as a source of free childcare and financial support?" Her carefully composed expression flickered. "You're twisting my words." "No, Victoria. I'm finally seeing them. Clearly." I opened my desk drawer and removed a large envelope, sliding it across the desk. "This contains comprehensive neurological and psychological evaluations conducted over the past 2 weeks. You'll find I'm operating at full cognitive capacity with no signs of decline whatsoever. I've already provided copies to my attorney." The color drained from Victoria's face. "You think we're trying to—" "I know exactly what you're trying to do," I interrupted calmly. "And it won't work. Now, was there anything else you wanted to discuss?" She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "The children miss you. Emma keeps asking why you don't visit anymore." The mention of Emma sent a pang through my heart, but I recognized the manipulation tactic. "I've attempted to schedule visits repeatedly. You've denied or restricted every request. If the children miss me, perhaps you should reconsider your approach." "You're the one who abandoned your commitments to them," Victoria replied, her composure cracking. "You chose your business over your own grandchildren." "I chose self-respect," I corrected her. "I chose not to be exploited by the very people who should value me most. And that choice seems to have revealed exactly how much, or how little, my presence was actually valued." Victoria gathered her designer purse, her jaw tight with anger. "This isn't over, Eleanor." "On that," I agreed quietly, "we are entirely aligned." After she left, I sat motionless, staring at the family photo on my desk. Matthew, Victoria, Emma, and Liam at last year's Christmas celebration. Despite everything, they were still my family. The children were innocent in all this, caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts and expectations. I picked up the phone and called Sophia. "I need to make another adjustment to the trust," I said when she answered. "I want to ensure the children can access funds for education regardless of what happens between me and their parents." "That's a significant change from your previous position," Sophia observed carefully. "The children shouldn't suffer because the adults in their lives can't behave decently toward one another," I replied. "Set it up so educational expenses are paid directly to the institutions, not through Matthew or Victoria. I'll draft the amendment right away." I hung up feeling marginally better. Whatever happened next, Emma and Liam's educational futures were secure. It was something, at least. The following Sunday, I received an unexpected text from Matt. "Family dinner tonight, 6 p.m. Kids really want to see you." The invitation was suspiciously normal after Victoria's confrontation in my office. Was this an olive branch, or another attempt to manipulate me? Either way, I couldn't refuse a chance to see my grandchildren. "I'll be there," I replied. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," came the response. I arrived precisely at 6, bearing gifts for the children despite Matt's instruction. New books for Emma, a puzzle that could be manipulated one-handed. For Liam, the house looked immaculate as always, Victoria's dedication to appearances evident in every perfect detail. Emma ran to me immediately, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Grandma, I missed you so much." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Every single day." Liam approached more cautiously, his blue cast decorated with colorful signatures. "Look, Grandma, everyone in my class signed it." "That's wonderful," I said, kneeling to his level. "And I brought something special that you can do even with your cast on." The children's genuine delight at seeing me was balm to my wounded heart. Whatever had happened between the adults, their love remained uncomplicated and pure. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Victoria was the perfect hostess, Matt attentive and engaging. They asked about my work, commented on business news, created the appearance of a normal family gathering. Only the occasional exchanged glance between them suggested something else might be brewing beneath the surface. After the children were excused, Victoria brought out coffee and dessert. The moment they left the room, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Matthew cleared his throat. "Mom, we've been doing a lot of thinking about our family situation." "Here it comes," I thought, keeping my expression neutral. "Oh? We realize we've taken you for granted," he continued, sounding rehearsed. "Your help with the children has been invaluable, and we didn't properly appreciate everything you've done for us." "That's kind of you to say," I replied carefully. Victoria reached for my hand across the table, an unprecedented gesture from her. "We'd like to start fresh, Eleanor, put all this unpleasantness behind us and rebuild our family connection." The sincerity in her voice was almost convincing. Almost. "I appreciate that," I said. "I've missed spending time with Emma and Liam." "We were thinking," Matthew interjected, "that maybe you could take them for a week this summer. We have a conference in Barcelona that would be perfect timing." And there it was, the real purpose of this reconciliation attempt. Not rebuilding family bonds, but securing childcare for their convenient schedule. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, surprising them with my easy agreement. "I'd love to have them stay with me. When is the conference?" Victoria's smile widened. "The third week of July. We'd need to leave Monday and would return the following Monday. I'll check my calendar, but I believe I can arrange that." I took a deliberate sip of coffee. "Though I may need to bring in some help on the days I have important meetings. I'm sure you understand I can't step away from work completely." A flicker of annoyance crossed Victoria's features, quickly replaced by a tight smile. "Of course, your career is important." Again, that slight pause before acknowledging my work. Some things never changed. "Speaking of important matters," Matthew said, shifting gears smoothly, "we've been thinking about Emma and Liam's future. Their education, college funds, that sort of thing." "Have you?" I kept my tone light, though inwardly I tensed. "We know how much you love them," he continued, "and we thought it might be meaningful for you to participate in securing their future. Many of our friends' children have trust funds established by their grandparents." Victoria nodded enthusiastically. "It's become quite common. Heather has several friends who've set up substantial trusts for their grandchildren. It's really the most loving legacy one can leave." They were so transparent it was almost embarrassing. The fancy dinner, the rehearsed apology, the carefully orchestrated reconciliation, all leading to this clumsy attempt to access the very trust they didn't know already existed. I could have ended their performance immediately by revealing the truth, but something held me back. Perhaps I wanted to see how far they would go, or maybe I was simply curious about their approach. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I asked, innocently. Matthew leaned forward eagerly. "Something substantial enough to cover their education, and perhaps give them a start in life. You've built such an incredible legacy, Mom. It would mean so much to share that with Emma and Liam directly." "I see," I said thoughtfully. "And would you and Victoria be managing these funds until the children come of age?" "Well, naturally," Victoria replied. "As their parents, we'd ensure the money was used appropriately for their benefit." "Of course you would," I murmured. "Let me give it some thought." They exchanged triumphant glances, clearly believing their plan was working. I finished my coffee and stood. "It's getting late, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Thank you for dinner." "We'll set up another visit soon," Victoria promised, her voice warm with false sincerity. "The children have missed you terribly." I kissed Emma and Liam goodbye, promising to call them the next day. As I drove home through the quiet streets, a profound sadness settled over me. This was what our relationship had become. A transactional dance where affection was currency and family bonds were business arrangements. Howard would have been heartbroken to see it. My kind, principled husband had always believed family was sacred. He had taught Matthew to value people above possessions, character above convenience. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had been forgotten, replaced by Victoria's influence and the corrupting comfort of expected inheritance. The next morning, I called Richard again. "I need to accelerate the foundation launch," I told him, "and I want to make one more change to my will." The Howard Patterson Foundation for Financial Education launched on what would have been my husband's 70th birthday. I stood at the podium in the Grand Pavilion, looking out at the gathered crowd, business associates, community leaders, foundation partners, and a smattering of curious onlookers drawn by the local media coverage. Matthew and Victoria sat in the front row, their expressions carefully neutral, their presence more obligation than support. "Howard believed that financial knowledge was a form of freedom," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion swelling in my chest. "He came from nothing, the son of a factory worker who lost everything in the recession of the 1970s. He understood that wealth was not just about accumulation, but about stewardship and education." I glanced at Matthew, remembering how Howard had tried so hard to instill these values in our son. The weekend budget exercises, the summer jobs, the matching savings program, all attempts to teach him the value of money and the responsibility it carried. This foundation will provide comprehensive financial education to young people across our community, with special emphasis on those from disadvantaged backgrounds. We'll offer scholarships, mentorship programs, and practical training in everything, from basic budgeting to investment principles. The initial endowment was substantial, $20 million drawn from my personal assets and Walter's bequest. The figure caused a stir among the attendees, whispers rippling through the audience. I noticed Victoria straighten in her seat, her eyes widening slightly. The amount clearly surprised her. "Additionally," I continued, "the foundation will establish a special scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in financial counseling for underserved communities. These Howard's Helpers scholarships will cover full tuition and living expenses, ensuring recipients can graduate debt-free and focus on giving back." After the presentation, during the reception, Matthew approached me, champagne flute in hand. "$20 million is a significant commitment, Mom. I had no idea you were planning something on this scale." His tone was carefully neutral, but I could detect the calculation behind his eyes. $20 million diverted from what he likely considered his future inheritance. "Your father would have wanted this," I replied simply. "He always said wealth without purpose was just numbers on a page." Victoria joined us, her smile tight. "It's certainly generous, Eleanor, though I wonder if perhaps consulting with family might have been appropriate for a decision of this magnitude." The audacity was breathtaking. I wasn't aware I needed family approval for philanthropic decisions involving my own money, Victoria. Before she could respond, we were interrupted by Sophia Chen, who had attended as both my financial advisor and a foundation board member. "Eleanor, Senator Wilson is eager to speak with you about potential partnerships with the State Education Board." "Of course," I excused myself gratefully, leaving Matthew and Victoria to their champagne and calculations. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself alone with Sophia, both of us watching the cleanup crew dismantle the elaborate display boards showcasing the Foundation's mission. "You've certainly made a statement today," she observed. "How does it feel?" "Like Howard is smiling somewhere," I replied honestly. "This is what he would have wanted. His legacy extending beyond just our family." And speaking of family, Sophia's gaze drifted toward the exit where Matthew and Victoria had departed earlier, their goodbyes perfunctory. "Have you told them about the trust yet?" "No," I admitted, though they recently approached me about establishing one, ironically enough. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "They asked you to create what already exists?" "They asked me to create what they believe doesn't exist," I corrected her. More specifically, they wanted me to establish a trust under their control, ostensibly for the children's benefit. And you let them believe no trust exists at all? I'm waiting for the right moment, I said, though in truth, I wasn't certain such a moment would ever arrive. The trust existed for Emma and Liam's benefit, not as leverage in my increasingly fraught relationship with their parents. The foundation launch marked a turning point. Where Matthew and Victoria had previously attempted reconciliation, however, transparently motivated, they now retreated into cool formality. Family dinners became infrequent, my time with the grandchildren even more restricted. It hurt deeply, but I refused to be manipulated back into their good graces through access to the children. 2 weeks after the foundation announcement, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Benjamin ushered in Heather Blackwell, Victoria's mother, her expression a studied mask of friendly concern. "Eleanor, thank you for seeing me without an appointment," she said, settling into the chair, across from my desk. "I felt it was important we speak privately." I maintained a polite smile. "What can I do for you, Heather?" She adjusted her designer scarf, her movements deliberate. "I'm concerned about what's happening to our family. This estrangement between you and Matthew and Victoria is affecting everyone, especially the children. I've made every effort to maintain my relationship with Emma and Liam," I replied evenly. "Unfortunately, their parents have made that increasingly difficult." "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding," she suggested, her tone carefully diplomatic. "Victoria feels you've withdrawn from family life quite abruptly. The children were accustomed to your daily presence, and now they hardly see you." The attempt to shift blame was so transparent I nearly laughed. "Heather, we both know exactly what happened. Victoria made it clear I was just the babysitter, and when I reclaimed my professional life, I became inconvenient rather than essential." Heather's expression tightened momentarily before settling back into forced concern. "Words spoken in frustration shouldn't define an entire family relationship, Eleanor. We all occasionally say things we don't mean." "The issue isn't what," Victoria said. I corrected her. "It's what the entire family has demonstrated through their actions. I was valued primarily for free childcare and financial support, not as a person with my own needs and identity." "That's a rather harsh assessment," Heather objected. "Matthew and Victoria have always appreciated your help. Appreciation and exploitation are not the same thing." A flash of irritation crossed Heather's perfectly made-up face. "Well, regardless of past misunderstandings, surely we can find a path forward. For the children's sake." "I would like nothing more," I said sincerely. "But that path can't involve returning to the previous arrangement where I sacrificed my own life to meet their childcare needs." "No one is asking for that," Heather assured me, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But perhaps some middle ground? A more structured schedule where you could spend quality time with the children while still maintaining your professional interests." Again that slight pause, that subtle diminishment of my work. It was clearly a family trait. "I've offered weekend visits repeatedly," I reminded her. "Victoria finds reasons to decline or reschedule almost every time." "She's been under tremendous pressure at work," Heather defended quickly. "The partner track is extraordinarily demanding." "I understand demanding careers, Heather. I've built and run a successful investment firm for 40 years. Heather waved this away as if it were a minor hobby rather than a lifetime of achievement. "Yes, of course. But surely you understand the challenges of balancing motherhood with professional ambitions." "Better than most," I agreed. "Which is why I made myself available to help with the children in the first place." A momentary silence fell between us. Heather seemed to reassess her approach, her manicured fingers tapping lightly on her designer handbag. "Eleanor, forgiveness is an important virtue," she said finally, her tone taking on an almost sermonizing quality. "Holding grudges only hurts everyone involved, especially innocent children." "I've forgiven," I replied calmly. But forgiveness doesn't require returning to unhealthy patterns. I can forgive Victoria's disrespect while still maintaining boundaries that protect my self-worth. Heather's facade of concern finally cracked. This financial education foundation of yours, $20 million. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could have meant for Emma and Liam's future? And there it was, the real reason for her visit. Not family reconciliation, but family funds. Emma and Liam's futures are quite secure, I assured her, revealing nothing. Are they? Heather challenged. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're systematically diverting resources away from your own grandchildren to spite their parents. The accusation was so wildly unfair it momentarily robbed me of speech. I had restructured my entire life to support those children, had already established a multi-million-dollar trust in their names, had protected that trust specifically to ensure their parents couldn't misuse it. I think we're done here, I said finally, rising from my chair. Any further discussions about my family relationships should include Matthew and Victoria directly, not through intermediaries. Heather stood, smoothing her expensive slacks. You've changed, Eleanor. Howard would be disappointed to see what you've become. Bitter, vengeful, putting your ego above your family's needs. The invocation of my late husband's name sent a spike of genuine anger through me. Don't you dare presume to speak for Howard. He built this company with me, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. He understood the value of hard work, integrity, and self-respect. All qualities he would expect me to maintain, even when it's difficult. Well, Heather said stiffly, I can see this conversation is pointless. But don't be surprised when your actions have consequences. Family relationships are precious, Eleanor. Once broken, they're not easily repaired. After she left, I sat in my office, staring at the family photo still on my desk. Howard beaming, proudly, his arm around a younger me. Matthew as a teenager, gangly and smiling, his future stretching bright before him. Where had we gone wrong? How had the values we worked so hard to instill been so thoroughly erased? That evening, I called Judith again. My sister had always been my ballast, her clarity a counterpoint to my tendency toward self-doubt where Matthew was concerned. Heather Blackwell came to see me today, I told her after exchanging pleasantries. Apparently, I'm bitter and vengeful for establishing a charitable foundation instead of simply handing over money to Victoria and Matthew. Judith snorted. The nerve of that woman. As if you haven't already provided more than enough for that family. She said Howard would be disappointed in me, I admitted, the words still stinging hours later. That's emotional manipulation, pure and simple, Judith said firmly. Howard would be proud of you for standing your ground and using your resources thoughtfully. He'd be disappointed in Matthew for becoming so entitled and in Victoria for treating you like hired help. Her certainty warmed me. I miss them, Judy. Not Matthew and Victoria so much right now, but the children. Emma and Liam didn't ask for any of this. I know, she said more gently. But remember, you're fighting for their future too. Setting an example of self-respect and appropriate boundaries is a gift in itself. After our call, I sat in Howard's study, surrounded by his books and the subtle scent of his favorite leather chair that somehow lingered years after his passing. I pulled out our old photo albums, tracing my finger over images of Matthew as a child, gap-toothed and exuberant, riding his first bicycle, graduating elementary school, building sandcastles on our rare family vacations. Where did we lose him, Howard? I whispered to the empty room. Was it when we moved to the better neighborhood for the schools? Was it when we started covering his college apartment rent? Or was it Victoria, reshaping him to fit her image of success? The pictures offered no answers, just echoes of a family I barely recognized anymore. 2 days later, Matthew appeared at my door unannounced. It was early evening, and I had been reviewing foundation grant applications in Howard's study. Matthew, I said, surprised to see him standing on my doorstep alone. Is everything all right? He shifted uncomfortably. Can I come in? I'd like to talk. I led him to the living room, noting the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. Can I get you something to drink? Just water, thanks. Arstor. When I returned with his water and tea for myself, he was studying the family photos on the mantel, snapshots spanning decades, documenting our history together. I remember this camping trip, he said, pointing to a faded photograph of the three of us beside a lake, Howard patiently teaching 8-year-old Matthew to fish. Dad was so determined I'd catch something, we stayed out until sunset. And you finally caught that tiny perch, I recalled with a smile. Howard insisted on cooking it even though it barely made 2 bites. He said it was the sweetest fish he'd ever tasted. Matthew's expression softened with the memory. He never made me feel like I'd failed, even when I messed up. That was Howard's gift, I agreed. He always saw the effort behind the outcome. A heavy silence fell between us. Finally, Matthew set down his water glass and turned to face me directly. Mom, what's happening to our family? How did we get here? The question seemed genuine, lacking the calculation I'd grown accustomed to seeing in his interactions with me. For a moment, I glimpsed the son I remembered, thoughtful, sensitive, capable of reflection. We're experiencing the consequences of choices made over time, I said carefully. My choice to step back from being full-time childcare. Your and Victoria's choice to see that as abandonment rather than necessary self-care. Everyone's choice to prioritize convenience over connection. He flinched slightly at my candor. Victoria says you're punishing us for asserting normal parental authority, that you can't handle not being in control of the children's upbringing. Is that what you believe? I asked quietly. Matthew ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture. I don't know what to believe anymore. Victoria is convinced. You've written us out of your will, that the foundation was created specifically to divert money away from us and the children. And what do you think, Matthew? He looked away, uncomfortable with direct questioning. I think maybe we've taken you for granted, expected too much. It was the closest thing to an admission of fault I'd heard from him in years. I felt a flicker of hope, quickly tempered by experience. Matthew had always been quick to acknowledge mistakes in the moment, but slow to actually change his behavior afterward. Why are you here tonight? I asked directly. What prompted this visit? He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. Victoria's found a new private school for the children, Wellington Academy. It's the best in the city, but the tuition is substantial. With both kids attending, plus the extracurriculars Victoria feels are important, we're looking at over $70,000 a year. And there it was, the real motivation behind this sudden introspection. Not genuine reconciliation, but financial need. That is substantial, I agreed neutrally. What does this have to do with me? Matthew shifted uncomfortably. We've been going over our finances, trying to make it work without compromising other aspects of the children's lifestyle. It's proving challenging. Victoria thought, perhaps, given your commitment to education, you might consider helping with the tuition. The careful phrasing couldn't disguise what this was. Another attempt to access my resources while maintaining the fiction that it was somehow for the children's benefit rather than their own convenience. You earn a substantial income, Matthew. Your home is worth over $2 million. Victoria drives a luxury SUV that costs more than most people's annual salary, yet you can't find room in your budget for the children's education? His face flushed. Our expenses are significant. The mortgage, the club membership, the children's activities, all choices. I interrupted gently. Choices reflecting priorities. So you won't help? His tone shifted toward indignation. After everything you've said about valuing education, You won't support your own grandchildren's schooling? I considered my response carefully. I could reveal the trust now, explain that funds were already set aside specifically for educational expenses. But something held me back. Perhaps the knowledge that once Matthew and Victoria learned of the trust's existence, they would focus all their energy on gaining control of it, rather than reassessing their own financial choices. I'll need to think about it, I said finally. Education is indeed important, but so is learning to live within one's means and make responsible financial decisions. Matthew stood abruptly. Right. Well, I've delivered the message. Victoria. Said you'd refuse, that you're more interested in punishing us than helping Emma and Liam. This has never been about punishment, Matthew, I said sadly. It's about respecting me as a person, not just a resource to be tapped when convenient. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. The school needs a decision by next Friday. The children's educational future is at stake. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet house, turning the situation over in my mind. Wellington Academy was indeed excellent. Ironically, the very school I had researched for Emma's music program, the brochure that had triggered Victoria's "just the babysitter" comment. The children would thrive there, with smaller classes and specialized programs tailored to their individual talents. But simply writing a check would solve nothing. It would reinforce Matthew and Victoria's belief that I existed to bail them out of financial constraints created by their own lifestyle choices. It would perpetuate the unhealthy dynamic I'd been working to change. The next morning, I called Sophia Chen. I'd like to activate the educational provision in the Children's Trust, I told her, specifically for tuition at Wellington Academy. Are you informing Matthew and Victoria about the trust? She asked. Not yet, I decided. I'll establish the payment directly with the school as a third-party scholarship through the foundation. The children get their education, but Matthew and Victoria don't get to avoid the hard conversations about their financial priorities. Sophia was silent for a moment. That's an unusual approach. They'll eventually discover the source of the funding. Yes, I agreed. But hopefully by then, they'll have gained some perspective on their own financial choices. Later that day, I visited Wellington Academy and met with Dr. Evelyn Bates, the school's principal. I explained my situation in broad terms, my desire to support my grandchildren's education without enabling their parents' financial irresponsibility. This is unconventional, Dr. Bates admitted, but not unprecedented. We've had other grandparents establish similar arrangements, particularly in cases of family business transitions or complex inheritance situations. We worked out the details. The Howard Patterson Foundation would establish a special scholarship fund at Wellington, with Emma and Liam as the first recipients. The school would inform Matthew and Victoria only that their children had qualified for financial assistance, without specifying the source. Will this create difficulties for you when they eventually discover the arrangement? Dr. Bates asked. Undoubtedly, I acknowledged. But it's the right solution for now. The children's education shouldn't be compromised because of adult conflicts. The following week, Matthew called, his voice tight with controlled anger. Did you establish some kind of secret scholarship for Emma and Liam at Wellington Academy? I arranged financial support for their education, I confirmed calmly. I thought that's what you wanted. Through your foundation, without telling us? His indignation was palpable. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to be called into the financial aid office and told our children qualified for assistance? Victoria is mortified. Her mother sits on 3 school boards. People talk, Mom. The irony was almost painful. They had approached me specifically to pay for the children's education, yet were now angry that I had done exactly that, albeit not in the way they had envisioned. The children's education is secured, I reminded him. Isn't that what matters? What matters is that you did this behind our backs, Matthew exploded. You deliberately undermined our authority as parents. You made us look like charity cases. Matthew, you literally asked me to pay for their education. I've done so. We asked you to support your grandchildren directly, not create some public scholarship that makes it look like we can't provide for our own family. I sighed, suddenly tired of the circular logic, the endless conflict. The children have their school. That was the goal, wasn't it? Or was it really about maintaining appearances? His silence answered my question more eloquently than words could have. I'll send the acceptance paperwork for the scholarship fund, I said finally. If you choose not to use it, that's your decision. But the opportunity is there. After I hung up, I walked through my too-quiet house, past rooms that once echoed with family laughter, now silent testimonies to relationships fractured perhaps beyond repair. Had I made the right decision? Would Howard have handled things differently? The doubts crept in as they always did in these quiet moments. But then I remembered Victoria's dismissive tone. You're just the babysitter. Matthew's casual expectation that I should fund their lifestyle choices without question. Their joint attempt to have me declared mentally incompetent when I refused to bend to their will. No, I had made the right decision. The only decision that maintained my dignity while still providing for the grandchildren I loved. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from Wellington Academy confirming Emma and Liam's enrollment for the upcoming academic year. Whatever Matthew and Victoria's personal feelings about the arrangement, they had accepted the scholarship. The children would get their education, even if family harmony remained elusive. That small victory gave me courage for what came next. The following Monday, I met with Richard and Sophia to review all my financial arrangements. The trust for Emma and Liam was secure, with rigorous protections ensuring the funds could only be used for their benefit. The foundation was established with clear governance and purpose. My will was updated to reflect my current wishes. There's one more thing, I told them, sliding a folder across the desk. I want to sell the house on Oakwood Avenue. Richard raised his eyebrows in surprise. You've lived there for over 30 years. It's too big for just me, I said, having finally made peace with the decision. Too full of memories. I'd like something smaller, perhaps closer to the water. Howard always wanted a place where he could watch the sunrise over the lake. Are you sure this is the right time? Sophia asked gently. With everything else happening in your family? I'm sure, I replied firmly. This isn't about Matthew or Victoria. It's about me finally living the life Howard and I dreamed about for our retirement, the life we worked so hard to build. The decision felt right, a step toward reclaiming my own future, rather than remaining tethered to a past that no longer served me. Howard and I had purchased the house when Matthew was still in elementary school, choosing the neighborhood for its excellent schools and family-friendly atmosphere. We had planned to downsize once Matthew left for college, but then came his marriage to Victoria, the grandchildren, and the expectation that I would remain conveniently located for childcare purposes. That evening, as I began the daunting task of sorting through 3 decades of accumulated possessions, I came across a small wooden box in Howard's study. Inside were letters he had written to me during our early courtship, when his business trips would separate us for weeks at a time. I sat on the floor beside his desk, reading his words from 40 years earlier, his dreams and hopes spilling across the yellowed pages. Someday, he had written, when all this hard work pays off, we'll have that little house on the lake, just big enough for us, with extra rooms for grandchildren to visit. We'll watch the sunrise together every morning and thank our lucky stars we found each other. We never got that house on the lake. Life intervened. Matthew's education, business expansions, Howard's health problems, and eventually, his death. But now I realized I could fulfill that dream for both of us. The next day, I contacted Natalie Foster, a real estate agent recommended by Judith. I'm looking for a property on the lake, I explained. Something peaceful, with a view of the sunrise. Waterfront properties are at a premium right now, Natalie cautioned. but I have a few listings that might interest you. One in particular, a contemporary build in Riverside Heights. 3 bedrooms, lots of natural light, and an east-facing deck perfect for morning coffee. We arranged to view the property that weekend. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt a sense of rightness wash over me. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a spectacular view of the water, morning light dancing across the gentle waves. The open layout felt both spacious and intimate, with enough room for my essential belongings but none of the echoing emptiness of my current home. The master suite faces the water, Natalie explained as she led me through. You can literally wake up to the sunrise, and these 2 additional bedrooms would be perfect for guests or grandchildren. I walked out onto the deck, feeling the gentle lake breeze against my face. Howard would have loved this place. The clean lines, the connection to nature, the peace it exuded. I'll take it, I decided, surprising even myself with the certainty in my voice. Don't you want to think about it? Natalie asked, startled by my immediacy. Perhaps get a second opinion from family? I've been thinking about it for 40 years, I replied with a smile, and this decision is mine alone to make. The process moved quickly after that. My Oakwood Avenue home sold within 2 weeks, snapped up by a young family enchanted by its established neighborhood and spacious rooms. I felt a bittersweet satisfaction knowing new children would soon run through those halls, creating their own memories in spaces where Matthew had once played. I didn't tell Matthew about the move immediately. Part of me dreaded his reaction, the inevitable accusations that I was distancing myself further from the family. But mostly, I wanted to complete this transition on my own terms, without justification or apology. The day the moving trucks arrived, I walked through each room of my old home one last time, saying goodbye to the house that had sheltered so many chapters of my life. In Matthew's old bedroom, I paused longest, remembering the little boy who had once filled this space with laughter and dreams. I did my best, I whispered to the empty room. I hope someday you'll understand that. As I locked the front door, for the final time, I felt an unexpected lightness. This wasn't an ending but a beginning. My beginning, on my terms. The movers finished unloading at the lake house just as the sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I thanked them, tipped generously, and then found myself alone in my new home, surrounded by boxes and possibility. I opened a bottle of Howard's favorite wine, poured a single glass, and walked out onto the deck. We finally got our lake house, my love, I said to the deepening twilight. Better late than never. That night, I slept better than I had in years, lulled by the gentle sound of waves against the shore and the knowledge that I was, at last, exactly where I was meant to be. The next morning, I woke to witness my first sunrise from the master bedroom windows. As promised, the view was spectacular. Ribbons of pink and gold spreading across the water, heralding a new day, a new chapter. I was still admiring the view, coffee in hand, when my phone rang. Matthew's name flashed on the screen. It was time to tell him about the changes I'd made, not just to my living situation, but to my entire approach to life. It was time to be completely honest about the trust, the foundation, and my hopes for rebuilding our family relationship on healthier terms. Whether he would accept this new reality remained to be seen. But for the first time in years, I felt fully prepared to stand in my truth, regardless of the consequences. I took a deep breath and answered the call. Mom? Are you there? Matthew's voice crackled through the phone, tinged with impatience. I took a steadying breath, watching the sunrise spread its golden fingers across the lake. Yes, I'm here. I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. The realtor called to confirm the closing details for the house, and I had no idea what she was talking about. Why didn't you tell me you were selling? No greeting, no pleasantries, just immediate demands for explanation. It was so typical of our interactions lately that I almost laughed. I've already sold the house, Matthew. The closing was last week. I've moved. The silence that followed was weighted with shock. You sold our family home without even mentioning it to me? It was my home, I corrected gently. Purchased with money Howard and I earned together. You haven't lived there in nearly 15 years. But all our memories, all our history, how could you just dispose of it? The genuine hurt in his voice gave me pause. For all his recent behavior, Matthew had grown up in that house. It represented security and continuity during times of change. But it had become a mausoleum for me, filled with echoes of a family that no longer existed in the same form. The eye. Memories aren't in the walls, Matthew. They're in our hearts, in the photographs I've carefully preserved, in the stories we tell. But I couldn't keep living surrounded by emptiness just to maintain a physical connection to the past. Where are you? He demanded. Where have you moved to? I bought a place on Cedar Lake. It's smaller, more manageable. It suits my needs, now. Cedar Lake? That's 40 minutes from us. There it was, the real concern. Not my well-being or happiness, but the inconvenience to their schedule. It is, I agreed calmly. But it's where I want to be. What about the children? Did you consider them at all in this decision? How are they supposed to visit you regularly when you're so far away? I sighed, weariness washing over me. Matthew, let's be honest. You and Victoria have restricted my time with Emma and Liam to carefully supervised weekend visits for months. Now, the distance changes very little in practical terms. That's not, he began, then stopped abruptly. After a moment, his tone shifted. This isn't just about the house, is it? You're systematically cutting ties with all of us. No, I said firmly. I'm creating healthy boundaries. There's a significant difference. Mom, I don't understand what's happening anymore. First the foundation, now selling the house. It feels like you're liquidating everything. The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which made what I needed to say next even more difficult. Matthew, there's something else we need to discuss. Something important that affects Emma and Liam directly. What now? His wariness was evident. I've established a trust fund for the children. I kept my voice even, matter of fact. It was created shortly after Walter's passing, when I received his bequest. The trust is substantial, enough to cover their education through graduate school, if they choose, plus provide meaningful support as they begin their adult lives. The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. A trust fund, he repeated finally. All this time, you've had a trust fund for them, and you never told us? I was waiting for the right moment, I admitted. I had originally planned to announce it last Christmas as a gift to the family. But then what? You decided we weren't worthy of knowing? The bitterness in his voice cut deep. No, Matthew. Victoria called me just the babysitter, and you both made it abundantly clear that my only value was as free childcare and a potential source of funding. It changed how I approached the trust, but not its existence. Changed how? His tone sharpened with suspicion. I restructured it to ensure the funds would be used solely for the children's benefit. Education, health care, reasonable living expenses, with appropriate oversight to prevent misuse. Misuse, he echoed. You mean you don't trust Victoria? And me to manage our own children's inheritance. I designed the trust based on observed patterns, I replied carefully. The spending habits I've witnessed, the financial priorities you've demonstrated. This is unbelievable, Matthew said, his voice rising. All those discussions about establishing trust funds, you sat there and let us make fools of ourselves when it was already done? Those conversations weren't about the children's welfare, I reminded him. They were about accessing funds to maintain your lifestyle without adjusting your spending habits. You've become so cynical, Mom. So quick to assign the worst possible motives to everything we do. Perhaps he was right, in part. The hurt and disappointment of recent months had colored my perceptions. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen with my own eyes, heard with my own ears. I want what's best for Emma and Liam, I said finally. So do you, in your way. We simply disagree on what best looks like and how to provide it. So what happens now? Matthew asked, his tone resigned. You've sold the house, established the trust, launched the foundation, all without family input. What's left for us to discuss? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. What was left of our relationship beyond financial entanglements and expectations? How we move forward, I suggested quietly. How we rebuild a family connection based on mutual respect, rather than convenience or obligation. And what does that look like to you? His skepticism was evident. Regular, meaningful time with my grandchildren, recognition of my autonomy and right to make my own life choices, basic courtesy in our interactions. And in exchange, the transactional. Framing was telling. This isn't a negotiation, Matthew. It's about redefining our relationship in healthier terms. Well, you've certainly defined the terms clearly enough, he said bitterly. I'll talk to Victoria, but don't expect a warm reception. You've blindsided us repeatedly. Trust is in short supply right now. After we hung up, I remained on the deck, watching the sun climb higher above the lake. The irony wasn't lost on me. Matthew complaining about trust being in short supply when their actions had systematically eroded mine for months. But beneath the conflict and recrimination, a small part of me hoped this honesty, however painful, might be the foundation for something healthier between us. Not the easy, unquestioning relationship of the past, but something more balanced and genuine. That hope was short-lived. By evening, my phone was flooded with text messages from Victoria, each more accusatory than the last. You established a trust fund and didn't even consult us. Were you planning to ever tell us or just hold it over our heads forever? The children's education was our decision to make. You had no right to go behind our backs to the school. Moving 40 min away is a deliberate attempt to distance yourself from family obligations. The barrage continued, escalating in hostility, culminating in a final message that sent ice through my veins. We're consulting with attorneys about grandparent visitation laws. If you think you can control our children through money while avoiding actual responsibility, you're mistaken. The threat was clear. They were considering legal action to force visitation on their terms while simultaneously attempting to gain control of the trust fund. It was manipulation of the highest order, using the children as both weapon and shield. I forwarded the messages to Richard immediately. His response was swift and reassuring. These are emotional reactions, not legal strategy. The trust is ironclad. As for grandparent visitation, their case would be extremely weak given your consistent attempts to maintain contact. Try not to worry. But worry I did. Not about the legal threats, which Richard correctly identified as largely hollow, but about what this escalation meant for my relationship with Emma and Liam. Would Matthew and Victoria restrict my access even further? Would they poison the children's perception of me with half-truths and resentments? I slept poorly that night, dreams fragmented with images of courtrooms and accusatory faces. Morning brought no clarity, just a bone-deep weariness at the thought of continued conflict. Over breakfast, I called Grace, needing the steadying influence of my oldest friend. They're threatening legal action, I told her after explaining the previous day's events, using the children as leverage to gain control of the trust. Grace's response was characteristically blunt. Let them try. No judge would side against a grandmother who's established a multi-million-dollar trust for her grandchildren's benefit. This is desperation, not strategy. It's not the legal outcome I'm worried about, I admitted. It's what this does to my relationship with Emma and Liam. They're too young to understand these adult conflicts, but old enough to sense the tension, to absorb the negative messages about me. Then you need to consider direct communication, Grace suggested. Age-appropriate letters, phone calls, small gifts that remind them of your love, things that bypass Matthew and Victoria entirely. They monitor everything, I sighed. Screen phone calls, open mail before the children see it. Then be creative, Grace urged. You're Eleanor Patterson, for heaven's sake. You built a financial empire from nothing. Surely you can find ways to maintain a connection with two small children despite their parents' interference. Her confidence bolstered mine. She was right. I needed to focus on solutions rather than obstacles, to be as strategic in my personal life as I had been in business. That afternoon, I reached out to Dr. Bates at Wellington Academy, where Emma and Liam would be starting in the fall. As a major donor through the foundation, I had established a relationship independent of Matthew and Victoria. I'm in a difficult family situation, I explained candidly. My son and his wife are restricting my access to my grandchildren, who will be attending your school next term. I'm wondering what opportunities might exist for me to be involved in school activities, to maintain some connection with them in a neutral setting. Dr. Bates was thoughtful and discreet. We have a very active grandparent volunteer program. Many grandparents assist with our library, special events, and classroom activities. It provides regular contact while respecting the school environment. Would something like that interest you? Very much, I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Excellent. I'll send you the volunteer application. And Ms. Patterson, she added carefully, while we try not to involve ourselves in family matters, our priority is always the children's well-being. Having loving grandparents in their lives contributes significantly to that well-being. I spent the remainder of the day settling into my new home, unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. The physical work was therapeutic, helping to channel my anxiety into productive energy. By evening, the main living areas were taking shape, beginning to feel like mine rather than a stranger's house I happened to occupy. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Grandma? Emma's small voice sent my heart soaring. Is that you? Emma, yes, sweetheart, it's me. How are you calling? From Olivia's phone, she whispered. Mom and Dad are talking in the kitchen. They sound really mad. My chest tightened. Are you okay? Is everything all right there? I guess, she said, uncertainty clear in her voice. Mom said you moved away because you don't want to see us anymore. But that's not true, is it? The innocence of the question nearly broke me. No, sweetheart, that's absolutely not true. I moved to a beautiful house on the lake, with a special bedroom just for you and Liam when you visit. I miss you both terribly. Then why did you go? The confusion in her voice was heartbreaking. How could I explain adult complexities to an 8-year-old? How could I convey the concept of emotional self-preservation without portraying her? Parents in a negative light? Sometimes grown-ups need different things, I said carefully. I needed a quiet place with a pretty view, where I could watch the sunrise. But that doesn't change how much I love you and Liam. Nothing could ever change that. When can we see your new house? I hope very soon, I told her, though uncertainty gnawed at me. I'll talk to your parents about arranging a visit. They're still really mad, Emma confided. Dad keeps saying you've changed, that you're not acting like yourself. The words stung, even coming from an 8-year-old's understanding. People do change, sweetheart. Sometimes changes are necessary to be healthy and happy. But the important parts of me, especially how much I love you, those never change. Olivia says I have to go, Emma whispered suddenly. Mom's coming. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, darling. So very much. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a tangle of emotions, joy at hearing Emma's voice, anxiety about what she was witnessing at home, anger that Matthew and Victoria would tell her I'd moved away because I didn't want to see them. I texted Sophia. Need to discuss trust amendment. Can we meet tomorrow? Her response came quickly. 10 a.m. at my office. Everything okay? We'll explain in person, I replied. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with concerns and half-formed plans. By morning, I had reached a decision, difficult but necessary given the escalating situation. Sophia greeted me with concern when I arrived at her office, gesturing me to the comfortable seating area rather than the formal conference table. You look exhausted, Eleanor. What's happening? I explained everything, the threats of legal action, the alienation tactics, Emma's secret phone call. They're using the children as pawns, I concluded, and I refuse to participate in that dynamic. What do you want to change about the trust? Sophia asked, her expression troubled. I want to add explicit behavioral conditions, I said firmly. Access to major distributions will be contingent on demonstrated respect for my relationship with the children. If Matthew and Victoria actively interfere with or undermine that relationship, it triggers a revision of distribution terms. Sophia's eyebrows rose. That's unusual and potentially problematic from a legal standpoint. Behavioral conditions can be difficult to enforce objectively. Then we create objective metrics, I insisted. Minimum visitation days annually, unmonitored phone contact weekly, regular inclusion in significant events, all documented and verifiable. Eleanor, Sophia said gently, I understand your frustration, but weaponizing the trust will only escalate the conflict. I'm not weaponizing it, I objected. I'm protecting the children's right to a relationship with their grandmother without their parents' interference. The money has always been for them, not Matthew or Victoria. If their parents genuinely want what's best for Emma and Liam, this shouldn't be an issue. Sophia sighed, clearly troubled. Let me consult with the legal team about what's feasible. In the meantime, I strongly urge you to attempt mediation before making any structural changes to the trust. Once those doors are opened, they're difficult to close. Her caution gave me pause. Was I allowing anger and hurt to cloud my judgment? Would these changes truly protect my relationship with my grandchildren, or simply add fuel to an already volatile situation? You're right, I conceded finally. Let's hold off on formal amendments, but I want to document everything, every attempt at contact, every visitation request, every instance of interference. If this does escalate legally, I want a clear record of my efforts and their obstruction. That's sensible, Sophia agreed, visibly relieved. Documentation creates leverage without permanent changes that might be difficult to undo if the situation improves. Do you think it will improve? I asked, doubt evident in my voice. Sophia considered the question seriously. Family dynamics can shift dramatically when children's well-being is at stake. Right now, Matthew and Victoria are reacting emotionally to perceived threats to their authority and financial expectations. But as the reality of the trust's permanence sinks in, as they see the impact of this conflict on Emma and Liam, they may reassess their approach. I wanted to believe her, to imagine a path toward reconciliation that didn't require abandoning my hard-won boundaries. But the gulf between us seemed to widen with each interaction, each perceived slight, each misunderstanding. Over the next few weeks, a cold war settled between us. Matthew and Victoria didn't follow through on their legal threats, but they maintained strict control over my access to the children. Weekend visits became monthly, then bi-monthly, always supervised, always cut short for various manufactured reasons. I documented everything meticulously, as Sophia suggested. Every call attempt, every proposed visit, every gift sent and returned. The pattern was unmistakable. Systematic alienation disguised as parental prerogative. Through it all, I focused On preparing my new home for the day when Emma and Liam might visit, I furnished their rooms with thought and care, Emma's with a small keyboard and art supplies, recognizing her creative interests, Liam's with books about space and dinosaurs, his current obsessions. I planted a garden with a child-sized section where they could grow their own vegetables. I installed a telescope on the deck for stargazing, remembering how Howard had taught Matthew to identify constellations on camping trips. Every addition was an act of hope, a declaration that this estrangement was temporary, that love would eventually overcome pride and resentment. In early June, an unexpected opportunity arose. The foundation was hosting its first major event, a financial literacy workshop for high school students at the Grand Pavilion. Local media would be covering the event, including interviews with foundation leadership and beneficiaries. 2 days before the workshop, Richard called with surprising news. Matthew has requested tickets to the foundation event. 2 adults, 2 children. He wants to bring the family? I couldn't hide my astonishment. Did he say why? No explanation offered, Richard replied. Just a formal request through his assistant. I felt a flutter of cautious hope. Of course they're welcome. Please arrange VIP seating for them. The morning of the event, I arrived early to oversee final preparations. The Grand Pavilion had been transformed with interactive financial education stations where teens could learn about budgeting, investing, and entrepreneurship. Local business. Leaders would be speaking about financial responsibility, with scholarship announcements scheduled for the closing ceremony. I was reviewing my opening remarks when I spotted them entering. Matthew in a crisp suit, Victoria elegant as always, the children scrubbed and polished in their best clothes. Emma noticed me first, her face lighting up as she waved enthusiastically. Liam followed her gaze, breaking into a gap-toothed grin when he saw me. Before I could approach, Victoria placed a restraining hand on Emma's shoulder, whispering something in her ear. The child's expression fell, her hand lowering reluctantly. The message was clear. I was to keep my distance. This was a public event, not a family reunion. Fighting disappointment, I focused on my responsibilities as foundation chair. The workshop proceeded smoothly, with over 200 students participating in activities and discussions. Throughout, I was acutely aware of my family watching from their reserved seating area. Matthew impassive, Victoria coolly observant, the children fidgeting with the restraint of best behavior in public. During a brief intermission, as I was speaking with one of our business partners, I felt a small hand slip into mine. I looked down to find Liam standing beside me, his blue eyes serious. "Grandma, I lost a tooth," he announced, pointing to the gap in his smile. The tooth fairy gave me $5. Before I could respond, Victoria materialized, her smile tight. "Liam, I told you to stay in your seat. Grandma is very busy with important people." "It's fine," I assured her, kneeling to Liam's level. "A tooth is big news. I'm so glad you told me." "Can we come see your lake house?" he asked hopefully. "Mom said maybe someday when you're not mad anymore." Victoria's expression tightened further. "Liam, that's enough. Go back to your seat. With Emma. Now." After he reluctantly complied, Victoria turned to me, her voice low. "Please don't encourage him. We've explained that visits aren't possible right now." "Because I'm mad?" I quoted quietly. "Is that really what you've told them?" "We've told them what's appropriate for their age," she replied stiffly. "That there are adult disagreements that need resolving before regular visits can resume. There are no conditions on my willingness to see my grandchildren," I said evenly. "The only obstacles are the ones you and Matthew have created." She adjusted her designer watch, a nervous habit I'd observed before. "This isn't the place to discuss family matters." "Then when is?" "Every attempt I make at direct communication is ignored or rebuffed." Victoria glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the public setting. "Matthew thought it would be good for the children to see you in this environment, successful, respected, doing important work." To understand why you chose this over them. The implication sent anger flaring through me. I never chose anything over them. I chose not to be exploited and disrespected. There's a profound difference. Is there? Her tone was skeptical. From where they're standing, their grandmother disappeared from daily life, moved 40 minutes away, and now runs a foundation instead of picking them up from school or helping with homework. Because you and Matthew deliberately framed it that way, I replied, keeping my voice steady with effort. You could have explained that Grandma has important work too, just like Mommy and Daddy, that loving someone doesn't mean being available. On demand. That relationships require mutual respect and consideration. Victoria's expression hardened. We're not having this conversation here. We came because Matthew thought it was important for the children to maintain some connection with you. If you can't appreciate that effort without turning it into an indictment of our parenting, perhaps it was a mistake. She turned away, heading back toward their seating area. I watched her go, frustration and sadness warring within me. Even this small attempt at connection had devolved into conflict. The remainder of the event passed in a blur of speeches, presentations, and scholarship announcements. As foundation chair, I presented the awards, my professional smile firmly in place despite the emotional turbulence beneath. From the corner of my eye, I saw Emma watching me intently, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. When the formal program concluded, attendees moved to the reception area for refreshments and networking. I was speaking with a local education official when Emma appeared at my elbow, alone this time. "Grandma, I made this for you," she said, pressing a folded paper into my hand. "Don't open it yet. Wait till we're gone." Before I could respond, Matthew approached, his expression unreadable. "Emma, your mother's waiting by the door. We need to go." Emma hesitated, then threw her arms around my waist in a quick, fierce hug. "I miss you," she whispered, before darting away to join her mother. Matthew lingered, his gaze sweeping over the impressive event space, the prominent foundation signage, the respected community leaders in attendance. "You've certainly created something substantial here." "Thank you," I replied, uncertain of his mood or intention. The scholarship recipients, their stories were quite moving. Young people who might never have had educational opportunities. Otherwise, I nodded, waiting for him to continue, sensing he had more to say. "I keep trying to understand," he said finally, his voice low. "This person you've become, the foundation chair, the financial education advocate, the lakefront property owner who sets strict boundaries and conditions on family relationships. It's so different from the mother I knew." "Is it?" I challenged gently. "Or is it simply that for most of your life, you saw only the parts of me that served your needs directly? The nurturing, the sacrifice, the constant accommodation?" He flinched slightly. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When was the last time before today that you attended a business event of mine? When did you last ask about my professional accomplishments rather than my availability for childcare?" Matthew ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that always reminded me of Howard. "I didn't come here to argue." "Why did you come, Matthew? What was the purpose of this appearance?" He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Victoria thought it might be strategic to be seen publicly supporting the foundation. I wanted the children to have some contact with you, even if limited. And honestly, I was curious about what you've built here." The candor was unexpected. "And now that you've seen it?" "It's impressive," he admitted. "You've always been capable, but this is different, larger in scope, more public than anything you and Dad did together." People evolve, Matthew. Losing your father changed me. Being treated as just the babysitter changed me. Recognizing my own worth independent of my usefulness to others changed me. Not all change is negative. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than angry for once. The children miss you. Whatever is happening between the adults, that fact remains. I miss them desperately, I said, emotion thickening my voice. Every day, every hour. Then perhaps we can find some middle ground. Not the previous arrangement. That clearly wasn't working for anyone. But something more structured, more equitable. It was the first genuine olive branch he'd extended. In months. Despite my wariness, hope flickered within me. I'd like that very much, I replied carefully. But it would require mutual respect and clear communication, things that have been notably absent lately. Matthew's expression tightened momentarily, then relaxed with a visible effort. We can try, he said finally. For the children's sake. After they left, I unfolded the paper Emma had pressed into my hand. It was a carefully drawn picture of a house by a blue lake, with 5 stick figures holding hands in front. A tall woman with gray hair, a man and woman in the middle, and 2 smaller figures labeled Emma and Liam. Beneath the drawing, in her careful 3rd-grade handwriting, she had written, "Our whole family at Grandma's lake house. I hope we can visit soon. I love you even when grown-ups are mad." Tears blurred my vision as I carefully refolded the drawing and tucked it into my purse. Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that seemed to elude the adults in her life. Love persisting despite conflict, hope for reconciliation, family transcending disagreement. Perhaps Matthew's overture was sincere. Perhaps Emma's drawing was prophetic rather than merely wishful. Perhaps there was still a path forward for our fractured family. As I made my way through the dispersing crowd, accepting congratulations on the Foundation's successful launch, I held that hope close to my heart. Whatever came next, whether healing or further conflict, I would face it with the clarity and strength I had fought so hard to reclaim. The battle over the trust fund and my place in my grandchildren's lives was far from over. But for the first time in months, I felt the possibility of resolution that didn't require complete surrender of my dignity or independence. Sometimes that possibility is enough to take the next step forward. 2 weeks after the Foundation event, I received a formal email from Matthew. The contrast to his usual terse text messages was striking. This was composed with care, each word measured. Dear Mom, after considerable reflection, Victoria and I would like to discuss a path forward regarding family visitation and the Children's Trust Fund. We propose meeting with a professional family mediator to establish clear expectations and boundaries that work for everyone involved. Please let us know if this is acceptable to you. Regards, Matthew. Not warm, but not hostile either. Progress of sorts. I agreed immediately, suggesting several reputable mediators known for their work with complex family dynamics. Matthew selected one, Dr. Robert Davidson, who also happened to be the community center director, where the Foundation ran several financial literacy programs. Our first mediation session was set for the following Tuesday at Dr. Davidson's private practice. I arrived early, my stomach knotted with both hope and trepidation. The waiting room was pleasantly neutral, designed to offend no one and comfort everyone. Beige walls, inoffensive landscape prints, magazines carefully selected for their uncontroversial content. Matthew and Victoria arrived precisely on time, both in business attire as if attending a corporate negotiation rather than a family mediation. Dr. Davidson welcomed us warmly, ushering us into a comfortable conference room with a round table that eliminated any suggestion of sides or opposition. Before we begin, he said once we were seated, I want to emphasize that mediation is not about winning or losing. It's about finding sustainable solutions that honor everyone's core needs while acknowledging practical limitations. Can we all commit to that goal today? We nodded our agreement, though I noticed Victoria's fingers drumming lightly on her leather portfolio, a tell of anxiety or impatience I'd observed in previous difficult conversations. Let's start with what brought us here, Dr. Davidson suggested. Not to assign blame, but to understand the core issues that need addressing. Victoria spoke first, her voice carefully controlled. Eleanor established a substantial trust fund for our children without consulting us. She then used that trust to undermine our parental authority by arranging private scholarships to Wellington Academy. When we expressed concerns about her approach, she sold her home and moved 40 minutes away, making regular contact with the children difficult. I waited for her to finish, resisting the urge to interrupt with corrections. When Dr. Davidson nodded for me to respond, I took a deep breath. I established the trust fund out of love for my grandchildren, intending it as a gift to the family. After being referred to as just the babysitter and treated as a convenient source of free childcare rather than a person with my own needs and identity, I reassessed how to protect both myself and the children's financial future. The scholarship arrangement ensured their education wouldn't be compromised by adult conflicts. As for moving, I chose a home that brings me peace after years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. Matthew shifted uncomfortably. Mom. Makes it sound like we were exploiting her. We were grateful for her help with the children. We just expected some consistency, especially since she'd established that pattern for years. Expected or assumed? Dr. Davidson asked gently. There's an important distinction. The question hung in the air, creating a moment of reflection I hadn't anticipated. Matthew looked down at his hands, then back up with surprising candor. Assumed, I suppose. We built our lives around Mom's availability without really discussing whether that arrangement still worked for her. Victoria shot him a sharp glance, clearly unhappy with this concession. Dr. Davidson nodded encouragingly. That's an important insight, Matthew. Eleanor, how does hearing that acknowledgement affect you? It means a great deal, I admitted. The heart of this conflict has never been about money or even time with the children. It's been about recognition of my autonomy, my contributions, my right to make my own choices without being made to feel I'm abandoning my family. The session continued for nearly 3 hours, moving from airing grievances to identifying common ground. Dr. Davidson guided us skillfully through difficult moments, helping translate accusation into feeling, defensiveness into acknowledgement. By session's end, we had established a framework: bi-weekly weekend visits where the children would stay at my lake house overnight, regular video calls on Wednesday evenings, and my attendance at school performances and sports events. In exchange, I agreed to provide monthly updates about the trust fund and consult Matthew and Victoria before making any significant changes to its structure. This is just a beginning, Dr. Davidson emphasized as we reviewed the written agreement. Rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort from everyone. I suggest we meet again in 1 month to assess how these arrangements are working and make any necessary adjustments. Not perfect, but workable. A beginning rather than an ending. The real test came 2 days later when I picked up Emma and Liam for their first overnight visit. Victoria handed over their carefully packed overnight bags with minimal conversation, her expression neutral, but not overtly hostile. The children are excited, she said, almost reluctantly. They've been talking about the lake house all week. I've been looking forward to it too, I replied sincerely. Their rooms are all ready. Emma bounded into the car, chattering immediately about school and friends and her new piano teacher at Wellington Academy. Liam followed more slowly, eyeing me cautiously as if unsure whether the grown-up conflict had truly been resolved. Is your house really right on the water? He asked once we were driving. It is, I told him, smiling at his reflection in the rearview mirror. You can see the sunrise from your bedroom window, and there's a family of ducks that visits every morning, looking for breakfast. As we drove away, I caught Matthew watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. We had a long road ahead. Trust to rebuild, boundaries to respect, patterns to change. But the children in my back seat, already debating which lake activities to do first, represented hope in its purest form. That weekend unfolded like a gift. We baked cookies in my new kitchen, set up the telescope for stargazing, planted sunflower seeds in the garden. Small, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary after months of separation and supervised visits. Saturday evening, as the children were preparing for bed, I found Emma standing in her room, examining the keyboard I'd placed there. "Do you still have piano lessons?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She nodded, pressing a key softly. "Twice a week at Wellington. Miss Olivia says I have natural talent." "She's right. You always did, even as a tiny girl. You would hum melodies perfectly in tune before you could even talk." Emma looked up, surprised. "Really? Mom never told me that." "There are many things I could tell you about when you were little," I said, sitting beside her on the bed. "Stories your parents might not remember or think to share." "Like what?" "Like how you refused to wear anything but purple for an entire month when you were 4. Or how you used to read to Liam before you actually knew how, making up wild stories based on the pictures." She giggled, delighted by these glimpses into her younger self. "Tell me more." We sat there for nearly an hour, sharing memories and stories, building bridges across the months of separation. When she finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of rightness that had been missing for too long. On Sunday afternoon, as I drove them home, Emma asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you and Dad and Mom still mad at each other?" I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things. It doesn't mean they're mad exactly, just that they need time to figure out solutions that work for everyone. "Like a math problem?" Liam suggested from the back seat. "When it's really hard and you have to try different ways to solve it?" I smiled at his innocent wisdom. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. And I think we're getting closer to the answer." When we arrived at their house, Victoria invited me in for coffee, a small gesture but significant. Matthew joined us briefly, asking politely about the weekend activities. The conversation was stilted but civil, lacking the undercurrent of hostility that had characterized our interactions for months. As I prepared to leave, Emma grabbed my hand. "Next time, can we go fishing at the lake? Dad said Grandpa Howard used to take him fishing when he was little." I glanced at Matthew, surprised. He shrugged slightly, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I might have been telling them some old family stories lately. Those words, family stories, carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Acknowledgement of our shared history, our connection despite recent conflicts. "Fishing it is," I promised Emma, 2 weeks from today. Over the months that followed, our mediated agreement evolved into something more organic. The rigid visitation schedule gradually relaxed as trust rebuilt. Victoria began calling occasionally between visits, not just to coordinate logistics, but to share school updates or ask my opinion on birthday gifts. Matthew and I established a monthly lunch meeting to discuss the trust and foundation, conversations that increasingly included personal topics as well. The lakefront house that had initially symbolized my separation from the family became instead a gathering place. Matthew brought the children for impromptu Sunday afternoon visits. Victoria, initially reluctant, eventually joined them, gradually relaxing in the peaceful setting. During our follow-up session with Dr. Davidson, he observed the change with quiet approval. "You've all done the hard work of prioritizing what matters most, the children's well-being and the preservation of family bonds, while establishing healthier patterns of interaction." 6 months after our first mediation, we celebrated Thanksgiving at my lake house. As I watched Matthew teaching Liam to skim stones across the water, Victoria and Emma setting the table together, I felt Howard's presence more strongly than I had in years. He would have been proud of this hard-won peace, this family slowly finding its way back to one another. The trust fund that had become a focal point of our family conflict would continue to secure Emma and Liam's future. But the real inheritance, the values, memories, and relationships that money couldn't buy, was finally being reclaimed, one small step at a time. Sometimes being just the babysitter is enough to start a revolution. And sometimes revolutions, and not with victory or defeat, but with something far more valuable: understanding. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.